Nancy, one of the things that I've observed as my clientele has aged with me, but I've had older clients virtually my whole career, is that it's not uncommon for a client to call me with a request that's kind of out of the ordinary. And sometimes they'll tell me, well, my nephew, is in jail in Idaho, and I need to send money to his mother, my sister, to get him bailed out of jail. That's a real story. That's exactly what happened. But of course,
I think I got a phone call about that question.
and this doesn't smell right. And you don't have to be verging on dementia in order for people to take advantage of you.
Right.
You can be overly trusting.
Mm-hmm.
You can be acting out of a desire to help someone that you love. Or you may be the victim of a real operator, somebody who's really there to
Mm-hmm.
fleece you and to keep coming back and getting as much as they can. But unfortunately, in my position, until recently, there was no guidance for us as to what to do from FINRA, which is our self-regulatory agency, that would allow me to, when I get that call, to call the daughter or someone I know
Mm-hmm.
I can trust, to inform them that I think something's going on here, because my laws of privacy until recently would not allow me to make that phone call, and I'm really glad that I can now do that.
Mm-hmm.
But in the past, I've been unable to do that. Can you talk a little bit about some of the signs of maybe something fishy's going on, where an older person is being victimized in a financial way?
Mm-hmm. I can tell you by way of a couple examples.
Sure,
that would
that'd
be
be great.
helpful. I serve as legal guardian and power of attorney for people who don't have anybody
Mm-hmm.
or don't have an appropriate person. And I was the agent and trustee of a lady I'll call Mary.
Mm-hmm.
And Mary was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, but she was still living at home. She was still high functioning
Right.
with caregivers. And so I have a fiduciary assistant in my office
Mm-hmm.
who would meet with Mary regularly. And my fiduciary assistant, I'll call her Jane, found out that there was a loan, quote unquote,
Right.
$10,000 loan to one of these caregivers. And so when we looked into it, there was clear undue influence here. And this lady, our client, was so compassionate. She
Sure.
wanted to help this young couple who needed money, but it's just a loan. And so we set up papers so that these folks would pay back the money. And guess what?
Yeah.
They never did.
That's right.
They never did. And so that was one illustration of, unfortunately, being careful about whom is hired to care for loved ones,
Right.
to make sure that they're insured and bonded and licensed and all that stuff. In my context of being a lawyer, I've seen the worst case was a lady who she and her husband had been clients for a long time, and the husband died. And so we did a trust, a revocable living trust for the lady. And she had named certain children as co-trustees and co-agents, fiduciaries, that sort of thing. Well, an appointment was scheduled by the son, and he brought her in, and he was one of the most vicious people we'd ever dealt with. And it was very clear that he was demanding to be put in charge,
Mm-hmm.
and we wouldn't have it.
Right.
We didn't fall for it, but really trying to strong arm us. And mother was clearly afraid of him.
Yeah.
We've seen, we have a new case of a lady who was physically assaulted by people for her money.
Yeah.
And the police are investigating that now. and we're going to be pursuing that. But it's out there, and it's
Sure.
happening more and more as people become desperate for money, or they use substances or
Right.
that sort of thing.
You don't really need an excuse to be selfish and self-interested
No.
and try to take advantage of
No.
people. And I actually had a situation where a friend, not a client, was in need of someone to give care for his wife. And we recommended one of the local not-for-profit organizations, which will go unnamed, because in general, they do a really good job.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the caregivers convinced the wife to co-sign an auto loan
Oh, dear.
for $16,000. And of course, she, in really short order, defaulted on the loan.
Sure.
And it
Sure.
became their liability.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are the kind of things that happen with an unbelievable amount of regularity.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the important thing is, again, in the estate planning process, is to have the kind of advisors, like you say, the fiduciary responsibility, the assistance, having multiple levels of people that are responsible and have powers that you can rely on, and to build levels of trust between those people, so that if somebody comes to your aunt or your elderly neighbor and is telling them a story, that they'll be willing to go and talk to somebody about that.
Yes.
I mean, that's probably the most important thing we can encourage, is to, we don't want you to not be generous. We don't want people to not be
Right.
kind. But what we want is for people to be able to protect themselves. And for a lot of reasons, primarily because older people have money, lots of them do,
Mm-hmm.
that they become the targets for this.
Yes.
So it's a really important issue, and I want to thank you for sharing your
You're
experience
welcome.
on that.